Let's start in 2015. This was, in my opinion, the gold rush era of survival video games. You already had the classics dominating the genre, dominating the marketplace, dominating YouTube. You had Minecraft and Terraria, the classics, the kings, right? But then you also had newcomers in that 2013, 2014, 2015 era of, Don't Starve, 7 Days to Die, Project Zomboid, Strain the Deep, Subnautica. These were, in my opinion, the trendsetters in the survival game genre. These are the ones that created the standards that which we hold new survival games up to. But there's one game that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's The Forest. See, The Forest stood out to me back then. It was different from the other survival games. It was really the first survival game that you could label as being a horror game as well. You could argue that some of the earlier survival games, like 7 Days to Die, for example, had horror influences, but The Forest was the first one that was through and through, at its core, a horror game. On top of that, The Forest's graphics were pretty ahead of its time. When you compare it to other survival games in that time frame, it was leaps and bounds better. On top of that, you had the one element of the game that basically everyone collectively agrees is one of its strongest attributes, and that's the enemy AI. The AI gave you an actual sense that you're fighting real living creatures. They were unpredictable. They had cool different animations, cool different reactions to your own actions. It's like it was completely new for its time, and for it being an indie game, the enemy AI was really good. And on top of all that, you have the sense of this underlying story, the sense of mystery to the game, and the sense of discovery that a lot of other survival games, they might have had light stories back then, some small story and mystery elements, but The Forest was the one that really shined in this department. Now, I could sing this game's praises for hours, but in retrospect, if I'm being fair, there are criticisms to be made as well. My main critiques of The Forest fall into two different categories: lack of an actual reason to build a base, and weak survival game mechanics. Now, before you start eyeing that dislike button, just hear me out, alright? Hear me out for a second. Let me cook real quick. Let's think large scale for a second, right? Follow me in this question. Why do we even build bases in survival games? Okay? I'm talking about actual concrete reason, aside from cosmetic reasons, aside from just building something cool for building something cool's sake. Now, across all survival games I've ever played, I can think of two main reasons why I build bases, and those being A, for storage and upgrades, and B, a place for protection. In Minecraft, after spending a certain time in the world, even if you go and speedrun to the end and speedrun and get the Ender Dragon, after a certain time of playing in a world, you will need a place for chests. You will need a place for a furnace. You will need a place to put your enchanting tables, and the bookshelves for the enchanting table, and a place to make all your farms, etc, etc. In Terraria, you're gonna need a place to store all your loot. You're gonna need a place for NPCs to move into. Across all survival games, you usually want a place to store stuff. Now, in some games, like for example Project Zomboid, you can probably realistically do like a nomad style gameplay. But across the board, most of the time, you're gonna want somewhere to put a chest and put stuff in the chest. This isn't the case with The Forest. See, The Forest is unique because it's the only survival game I've ever played where every single item in the game already has a designated spot in your inventory. So, meaning, in other survival games, you have sort of a pick and choose of what you want to bring out with you and what you want to take home with you. In The Forest, that's not the case. You can have everything in your inventory at once. So therefore, you don't really need a place to store any loot. And the game basically vomits out as many resources as you need when you're out exploring anyway. So there's nowhere you need to return to resupply either. Then comes the argument of, oh, I want to build a base for protection. And honestly, on a first playthrough, that's pretty fair. I think every one of us on our first blind playthrough of The Forest, we all built a base to feel protected, to feel safe. But on second and third playthroughs, protection from what? The elements? Enemies? I mean, what are you defending yourself from? Rain is hardly an issue, and if you build a base, you're basically guaranteeing yourself to be attacked anyways. So building a base for protection against enemies isn't really a good reason if you're going to end up being spam attacked regardless. That's not to say that the base building and the base defense in this game isn't fun. It honestly really is. It's probably some of the best content this game has to offer. I mean, building a base with your friends and then building these various traps and then fighting against hordes of enemies, it's awesome. But is the only reason I made a base is to defend it? Then there are the survival mechanics. Now, let me preface this by saying I don't expect every single survival game to have, Project Zomboid levels of hardcore survival, right? Like individual limb damage, like depression, anxiety, boredom. I don't expect that level of survival gamey detail from every single survival game, right? But I feel like a game that labels itself as a horror survival game should be a little bit more deadly with its survival mechanics. There's a lukewarm sanity system in the game, but it's been since confirmed by the devs that it literally does nothing. There's a sickness system, but that's a joke. And the cold is granted one of the things that's actually deadly in the game, but even that is hardly a threat most of the time. Look, it may sound like I'm being an asshole. It may sound like I'm being harsh, and I probably am. I'm probably being harsh and I'm being an asshole. But it's coming at a place of love. In all honesty, these issues didn't even deter me from enjoying the game. It didn't deter me from beating the game multiple times with different people because it was Ed Night Games' first try at it. It was their first go at a game like this. And I was confident that with the sequel, they would learn from their mistakes and they would improve the game and they would push survival games even further than they did before. I was giga excited for Sons of the Forest. I mean, my level of anticipation for this game was at the same heights of my anticipation for games like Silksong, for Stalker 2, and for like Hytale, right? I had even made sure that each and every one of my gaming pals had played through and beaten the original Forest, right? And when it was all said and done, I had 8 friends locked and loaded to play Sons of the Forest with me. Sons of the Forest released in early access, and within 2 to 3 hour play sessions, my group collectively stopped playing. The game just wasn't ready to be played yet. We all decided collectively that it would be better if we just sat back and waited for 1.0 release. Well, 1.0 has been released, right? Me and my friends have gone and played it. We beat it, in fact. And what I can say is Ed Night Games, they kind of trolled it. Let me start with the good, okay? Let me start with the good. Graphically, this might just be the best looking survival game I have ever played. They nailed it. Everything from the lighting to the textures, and ooh, that tree chopping animation is just so crunchy and so good. I just want to eat the wood, bro. It's just Now the companion system is another thing that I really like. Some people kind of aren't a huge fan of it, I've heard, but I really enjoy it. I think Kelvin is really good at lifting some of the tedium out of the game, and Virginia she's good at fighting cannibals. Speaking of cannibals, the cannibal diversity is amazing as well. There's plenty of different types of cannibals to fight against, and their animations are just On top of that, the combat in this game is a huge step up from the first game as well, with the help of the animations and gunplay. The freeform building in this game is also really innovative and really interesting to play around, but it's also where the game starts to show its flaws. For starters, the building in this game is infinitely more tedious than it is in the first game. For example, if you want to build a wall in the first game, a spike wall, all you do is throw down the blueprint for it and then throw your logs into the blueprint, right? In this game, in Sons of the Forest, if you want to make that same wall, you have to individually put each of the logs into the ground and then individually spike each of them on the top. That is tedious. It is cool, but it also gets boring really quickly and loses its novelty really quickly as well. I don't know what possessed the devs to just flat out remove the system that worked in the first game. I mean, keep the freeform shit, right? It's cool, right? Let's keep it in the game. But can we please also keep the blueprints, man? Come on, son. Now on top of that, it turns out that N-Night Games did not fix either of my two main issues of the first game, which were lack of a reason to build a base and weak survival mechanics. There is still actually zero gameplay reason to build a base. And on top of that, the survival mechanics, keeping in mind I beat this game in hard survival, are still basically non-existent, right? The cold mechanics are easier in this game, and the only real dangerous thing is drinking bad water, which takes away a portion of your HP. But even that, all you need to do is just eat some medicine, or drink some clean water, and it goes away. But it honestly is even worse than that. They made a brand new problem for themselves, a brand new massive emphasis on the massive problem, which is the huge size of the map. This island is fucking huge. It's apparently 4 times the size of the original map, which is all I ask is why? The original game's map design was honestly one of its strongest elements. It wasn't huge, but I wouldn't go and call it small either. But the best part was that no matter where you were on the map, there was always something interesting to see or do, whether it be a point of interest, or a cave, or whatever. There was always something interesting very close by, no matter where you were located on the map. On top of that, because the game had such memorable points of interest, like the giant sinkhole, or the boat, or this big tree, etc., it was really easy to orient yourself on the map as well, without the need of a little mini-map. Sons of the Forest says, forget all that. Let's make this map enormous for no good reason. Because of that, the devs are then forced to give players a mini-map, which has every single important cave already mapped on it, which in turn gives you even less of a reason to build a base, because then you can just follow your mini-map and run from cave to cave to cave to cave and just beat the game. Let's just say if this game didn't have vehicles, I wouldn't even want to have finished it. I'll give credit where credit is due, okay? The vehicles in this game are awesome. They're its saving grace, I'm not gonna lie. When our group found Night V for the first time, it was probably the most entertaining moment in gaming I've had for years. I mean, seriously, the 20 to 30 minutes where we first found the Night V, it was 10 out of 10. It was perfection. We literally spent like 20 to 30 minutes just doing like tricks off of a cliffside. It was awesome. I loved it. It was perfect. And the golf cart, while not as fast and not as maneuverable as the Night V, has the benefit of having music and multiple seats. And let me just say, the music in this game, it kind of bops. And the hang glider probably saved our group countless of hours of just holding shift and W. Thank God for this item, and thank God the devs realized how important it is to be able to put it in your inventory. It saved us so many hours. It's also a lot of fun to use, going down, nosediving, and seeing how far you can go down before having to pull back up and getting maximum speed. It's a lot of fun. I can't even hate. So in totality, our group's experience of the game basically boils down to us running from cave to cave to cave to cave, using a variety of different means of transportation to arrive to each one, stopping for a short moment to build a base, a shitty little base that we quickly realize we have no reason to build or no reason to maintain or upgrade, so we quickly abandoned it, moved on, and beat the game, which I won't show too much of for spoiler's sake. And finally, speaking of the story, N-Night Games clearly put a lot of effort and a lot of money into the story of the game. There's a lot of animations, a lot of cutscenes, voice acting even. It's clear that they put a lot of effort into the story side of the game. And listen, the issue I have with that is, in all honesty, the story and the mystery of this game was never going to beat the mystery and the story of the first game. Just for the sheer fact that it's a sequel. It's already been done, right? So it wasn't gonna grab me like it did in the first game. And I was honestly hoping that the game's core gameplay and core mechanics would try to outshine the story, and the devs put more effort into that rather than the narrative of the game. Look, there are a lot of things about this game that are good and that are impressive, right? But when you stack so many tiny bits of tedium into a game, at a certain point you just can't ignore it. Sons of the Forest has too many issues for me to ignore. Most of these issues are relatively small and just slightly annoying, and honestly most of these small issues I didn't even mention in the video. But there are a couple of very big and very noticeable issues. And honestly, these big issues are really hard to solve because they're intertwined with how the game fundamentally works. Now, while I might be disappointed with the result of this game, imagine the third island though. Let him cook, let Edna, I got faith.